Howdy folks, hope you've all had a great weekend and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. And I'm particularly happy in this episode of Mingles with Jingles because I've managed to get the NordPass sponsorship back again. My favourite sponsor. Not just because I've been using it personally for years and I don't regret it for a second, but it's one of those products that I can genuinely put my hand on my heart and tell you that if you're not already using a password manager, you really probably should. And you can get it by going to nordpass.com/jingles and using code JINGLES. Sure, you can store all of your passwords in your browser. You can use the same email address and password for every site that you visit. You can even have password be your password, if that's your thing. And it probably won't come back to bite you in the arse. And while it's true that major sites like Amazon or eBay or Google have pretty tight security, and it's unlikely that you're going to have your credentials stolen from them, the hairdresser that you book your appointments with, or the online butcher that you buy your fancy Italian meats from, probably doesn't have the same level of online security. And if they ever get hacked, and you're using the same password and email address for everything, all the hacker has to do is take that combination of credentials on a phishing expedition around the big sites, and you wake up the next morning and find out you've just spent $3,000 on Amazon gift vouchers. At the same time though, I get it. Having to come up with a unique, unguessable, and easily rememberable password for every site that you log into is basically impossible. And that, of course, is what the hackers are counting on. And that is the advantage of NordPass, because it just does it all for you, as well as a whole lot more. But it's the password protection that's the main selling point, and you can get that, as well as some online peace of mind, by going over to nordpass.com/jingles. Using code JINGLES, all covered by their 30-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee. So, unlike last week's episode, there has been a fair bit of gaming-related news this week, and I suppose the big story is going to be the closed alpha release of Wargaming's new title, Project CW. Not the Project CW that everybody was expecting, based on all of the footage that got leaked a couple of years ago. The CW in the title apparently stood for Cold War, and we had seen footage of, well, tanks obviously, but attack helicopters too. A very sort of Cold War combined arms sort of battle game. Kind of the way War Thunder's going. That is not what we got. I think, and probably for very good reasons, because what we got was more a sort of the way armoured warfare used to be with their global operations, and may still be to this day, I'm not really sure. And this is going to sound really weird, but bear with me, that crossed with Overwatch. Because you've kind of got your tank and its commander, which they call an agent in the game, and they're kind of like your hero in Overwatch, thrown into a tank battle game. Yeah. So anybody who was expecting World of Tanks 2.0 was going to be gravely disappointed. And honestly, I think that was probably the best approach that they could have done, because, I mean, War Thunder's already doing Cold War combined arms warfare. World of Tanks is already doing World of Tanks. It doesn't make sense to do World of Tanks 2.0 because the only competitor's pocket that you're hurting doing that is your own. Why would you want to take people away from World of Tanks to play another tanks game, unless it's offering something radically different to World of Tanks or any of the other competitors? And I think it's probably the smartest way to go about things. Whether or not you're going to enjoy it, of course, is an entirely different matter. Now, I did, but that doesn't mean you're going to. Now, I did a video on this on Saturday, and it's never my intention to persuade you to buy or play something. I simply show you what something is, and leave it up to you to make your own decision. You're all adults. You can all think for yourselves. I did enjoy it. That doesn't mean you're going to. I mean, it's definitely a lot more pick up and play, and a lot less sweaty and try hard than World of Tanks. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing or a bad thing. It just means it's going to appeal to different audiences. And for a lot of people, the ultra-competitive nature of World of Tanks is what they enjoy about it. So you're probably not going to enjoy Project CW, and that's absolutely fine. I was a little concerned to see that even in the alpha they have a working store, an ominous sign of things to come. And while I definitely did enjoy it, let's just say, I mean, we're talking wargaming in particular, but all free-to-play games developers in general, they do like to lull you in with a bit of a honeymoon period where the game is really good at first, so that they can get your foot in the door and then start laying on all the gacha mechanics later. And I have no reason to believe that this is not going to be exactly the same. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't enjoy it during that honeymoon period while it's still good. Just be careful how much of an investment you make. And that's pretty much true of all free-to-play games. It's important that you go in there with your eyes wide open, knowing exactly what to expect. Because none of these games developers and publishers, and we're not just talking about free-to-play games developers and publishers, no games developer or publisher is your friend. They would dearly love you to think that they are, and a lot of them employ some very talented PR people to foster the illusion that they are in fact your friends. But at the end of the day, the only thing they want is your money. So it's important that you remember that so you don't get bitten in the arse later. That doesn't mean you can't enjoy their games, but just be aware of what it is that's actually going on here. In somewhat related news, I have to admit, it's kind of refreshing to see a games developer and publisher who not only knows that it isn't your friend, but isn't afraid that you know it too. That's right, Ubisoft are up to their old tricks again. In what I can only describe as a remarkably honest comment, Ubisoft's Director of Subscriptions, Philippe Tremblay, said that you shouldn't get used to owning your games. He's obviously talking about the subscription model here, where instead of buying something, which of course is what every major games publisher wants, it's just Ubisoft who actually have the balls to come out and say it. You will own nothing and you will be happy. He was obviously talking about video game subscription plans like, well, in this case, Ubisoft Plus, but, you know, you've got Game Pass and things like that. And basically said that gamers are going to need to become more comfortable with not owning games. He said, and I quote, "Consumers got comfortable not owning their CD or DVD collection. That's a transformation that's been a bit slower to happen in games. As gamers grow comfortable in that aspect." He then went on to say, and I'm not making this up by the way, this is still a direct quote, as one reason why you might find it more comfortable to move to a subscription-based game ownership policy rather than actually owning the game that you've bought. He said, "You don't lose your progress. If you resume your game at another time, your progress file is still there. That's not been deleted. You don't lose what you've built in the game or your engagement with the game. So it's about feeling comfortable with not owning your game." Wait, so hang on. Seriously? We need to get comfortable with not owning the things that we've paid for because on a subscription model, you get to keep your save progress. Did he really just say that? Yes, he really did. He seems to think that we're all stupid enough to think that save games are a thing that only happen on a subscription model. Words fail me. I mean, quite aside from the fact that we don't actually own any of our games anyway. Anybody who's bought a game in the last 20 years didn't actually buy a game. They just bought a license to play the game. But it's a license that you only have to pay for once. It's not the cash cow that keeps on giving, which is what the subscription model that our friend Philippe would like to get us all used to. Amongst the overwhelmingly negative responses to Philippe's comment, my particular favourite was, well, if buying something isn't owning it, then pirating it isn't stealing it, is it? So, probably not the response that Philippe was hoping for, but that seems to be the general consensus amongst gamers. And honestly, I think people are just getting sick and tired of subscriptions in general. I mean, it's not just games. Although I was heartened to see that apparently we in the gaming community have been the most resistant to this kind of change. But the usual culprits, things like the music streaming services, the video streaming services, things like Amazon Prime, things like Netflix, we've been seeing a degradation in the services provided by them in an attempt to get more money out of our pockets as well. Amazon Prime has just been terrible for years. Amazon Music, of course, being the music streaming service that you get with Amazon Prime subscriptions, and it absolutely sucks. I mean, I've bought music on Amazon Prime Music, and every time I flash up the music player, The first thing it asks me is, do you want to upgrade to the paid service? No, I don't. I'm already paying for it, thank you. It's part of my Amazon Prime subscription. Kindly just play the music that I have already bought and paid for. It then sort of grudgingly does that, but on its own terms, not mine, because it insists on playing in shuffle mode. I cannot actually listen to an album the way it's meant to be listened to. Unless, of course, I put my hand in my pocket and I upgrade to their paid music streaming service. All of this, by the way, in an effort to listen to the music that I have actually bought and paid for on Amazon. It gets better, of course. And when I say better, I mean worse. There are a couple of other terrible announcements from Amazon recently. Amazon Prime Video, which, by the way, is not a free service. You pay for it in your Amazon Prime subscription. You are already paying a monthly subscription to stream Amazon Prime Video, while also being given the option to pay extra for TV shows and movies that are not included in Amazon Prime. But since Jeff Bezos doesn't apparently already have all of the money in the world, they've just announced an upgrade, by which I mean downgrade to your existing Amazon Prime subscription. They're going to start including commercial breaks in all of the stuff that you're already paying a subscription for to watch on Amazon Prime, unless, you guessed it, you can put your hand in your pocket to fork out for an additional subscription to what I believe they're calling Amazon Prime Plus. Because of course they are. And I wouldn't really, well, I would mind, but I wouldn't mind as much if the service that they're providing was at least barely competent. Because one of the other announcements that they made was an upgrade to, and I hesitate to say her name because I do have an Amazon Echo sitting on my desktop, and if I say the name of the AI agent that comes with it, she'll try to sell me something, but you all know who I'm talking about. Let's just call her Angela, so she doesn't wake up and immediately try to sell me Amazon Music Unlimited, and doesn't do the same to you when you're listening to this video through your desktop speakers. Amazon also very recently announced an upgrade for young Angela here, that's what we're going to call her, which features ChatGPT technology in order to make her better able to actually hold a conversation with you. But it's not going to be free, despite the fact that you may have bought multiple peripherals scattered around your house incorporating this technology. The upgrades are going to cost you. And I wouldn't mind, well, I would, but I wouldn't mind as much if it was at least vaguely competent in the first place. Let me give you an example of the sort of thing I'm talking about. And I'm not just talking about every time I ask her to do something, she immediately tries to sell me something. Last night, I'm in the kitchen, I'm cooking dinner. And I turned around to Angela and I said, Angela, play some music. She said, sure thing. Playing from your most played song selections. And she immediately started playing Money for Nothing by Dire Straits from the Brothers in Arms album. Now, I don't have anything against this song, it's a cracking tune. I do like me a bit of Mark Knopfler strumming away on the old guitar. But I haven't listened to that song in years. So I don't know where she's getting the idea that it's from my most played songs. And not only that, it was a version of the song that I have never heard before. It featured an extended intro that was completely new to me. I mean, it wasn't bad. Like I said, I like Dire Straits. And I like the Money for Nothing tune in particular. But it definitely hadn't come from my playlist of most played songs, because I'd never heard it before. So one of two things is going on here. Although it's not outside the realms of possibility that they're both happening at the same time. She's either completely incompetent, which, let's face it, given the trials and tribulations that I detailed in last week's episode of Mingles with Jingles, with YouTube's just absolutely awful video recommendation system, it's not completely beyond the scope of possibility that Angela is just in fact absolutely terrible, but it's more likely that she's just trying to get me to buy the album. There is another possibility that just occurred to me though. It is completely possible that she is in fact just being programmed to be deliberately crap and annoying in order to get me to pay for the Plus version when it finally becomes available. This is not entirely without precedent. Big tech companies have done this sort of thing before. Hands up anybody who ever installed a trial or free version of an antivirus program, for example. Maybe one that, and we probably shouldn't mention names here, but starts with a letter N and sounds like Autumn, where right as you come to the end of the trial period, and everything's been going very smoothly up until now. Your system's clean, no problems, and then suddenly, just when you're about to reach the point where you're going to have to make the decision about whether or not you're actually going to start paying for this, your system suddenly starts detecting viruses. Oh no, all kinds of problems. If only you had a functional and up-to-date antivirus subscription. I've had a similar problem with... I don't actually... Most people in their PCs don't actually have a disk drive these days because we just download everything from the internet. But in the days when you did, and Blu-rays were becoming a thing, I used to buy and play a lot of Blu-rays. So instead of having a CD-ROM drive in my PC, I would always have a Blu-ray player in the PC. Now, you, of course, also needed software in order to play the Blu-rays on your desktop. And I used to use a product called Power DVD, mostly because it was reasonably cheap and it just did the job. But I started to notice a pattern, because Cyberlink would produce a new version of Power DVD every year, and it very rarely actually did anything different. I mean, it's a Blu-ray player. It plays Blu-rays, that's it. But right as it would come up to the point where they were about to announce the sale of the latest version, I would suddenly start getting playback errors on my existing version of Power DVD. Yeah, suspicious that, isn't it? Eventually they just stopped selling it. And instead of announcing a new... I mean, they'd still announce a new version every year, but you could no longer buy that new version. You instead, you guessed it, had to go with an annual subscription. You will own nothing, and you will be happy. But it's not all doom and gloom, and unsurprisingly, it's Larian Studios, the developers of Baldur's Gate 3, who weigh in with a bit of light in the darkness. Specifically in response to Philippe Tremblay from Ubisoft saying, "Get used to not owning anything," CEO and founder of Larian Studios, Sven Vinke, said in Twitter, and I'm quoting, "Whatever the future of games looks like, content will always be king, but it's going to be a lot harder to get good content if subscription becomes the dominant model and a select group gets to decide what goes to market and what not. Direct from developer to players is the way." Getting a board to okay a project fueled by idealism is almost impossible, and idealism needs room to exist, even if it can lead to disaster. We're already all dependent on a select group of digital distribution platforms, and discoverability is brutal. Should those platforms all switch to a subscription, it'll become savage. Or in other words, game development needs room to grow and breathe. And if we switch over to subscription models, which are purely fueled by maximising profits and not encouraging creativity, well, you wouldn't end up with games like Baldur's Gate 3. Fortunately, we do all still live in a world where games like Baldur's Gate 3 can and do exist. But ensuring that that remains the case, I'm afraid, is on us. I'm not trying to tell you what to do with your money. It's your hard-earned money after all. I'm just trying to make you aware of the implications of what is likely to happen if we all cave in and start giving in to the likes of Ubisoft and becoming comfortable with not actually owning what it is that we're paying them for. And on that bombshell, that's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you've all had a great weekend. And as always, take care. And I'll catch you next time.